Hello friends, and welcome back to Farmyard Care. Let me start with a picture that sounds almost unbelievable. On one side, there is a huge industrial farm, thousands of cattle, mountains of feed, expensive equipment, and years of debt tied to keeping everything running. On the other side, just a few steps away, there is a quiet old garage with a few plastic bins, a little movement inside, and almost no one paying attention. And yet in many cases that small space can produce more profit per square foot than the giant operation next door. That may sound like one of those old countryside stories people exaggerate over coffee, but it is happening right now. And the reason it matters is simple. So many people watching this channel are not running giant ranches. You may be working with a backyard, a basement, a small garden, a side yard, or just a dream of becoming more self-reliant without taking on crushing costs. You may love growing food, improving your soil, raising a few animals, and building something steady with your own two hands. In today's video, we are breaking apart one of the biggest myths in modern agriculture, the idea that bigger always means better. Because real resilience and real profit often come from value, not sheer size. We are counting down 10 most profitable farm animals they don't talk about. Some you can raise right in your garage. These animals may be small, quiet, and often overlooked, but they can turn limited space into real opportunity. We will look at old-school practical wisdom, the natural biology that makes these creatures so efficient, and the kind of farm math that can change how you think about income, independence, and the future of your homestead. So stay with me all the way through, because some of the biggest surprises are still ahead. And if you enjoy this kind of practical farm wisdom, make sure you subscribe to Farmyard Care before we get into the countdown. Part 1. Earthworms, the invisible soil engineers. Let's begin with number 10, and this one does not moo, cluck, hiss, or graze. In fact, some old biology books once described them in a very humble way as soil engineers. I'm talking about earthworms, especially red wigglers. Now, I know raising worms in a plastic bin sounds more like an odd backyard experiment than a real farm venture, but once you understand the numbers, the picture changes fast. Just 1 kilogram of red wigglers can process up to 5 kilograms of organic waste in a single week. What they leave behind is vermicompost, one of the richest natural fertilizers you can put into a garden. It is loaded with humic substances, enzymes, and beneficial microbes that help plants grow stronger, root deeper, and handle stress and disease much better. What makes this so powerful is the simplicity of the cycle. Your kitchen scraps become feed, that feed becomes premium compost, and that compost becomes something gardeners and organic growers are happy to pay for. On top of that, worm populations can double every 2 to 3 months under the right conditions. That is why I often tell people this is one of the quietest little biological investments you can make. It keeps multiplying while it keeps improving your soil. And maybe that is exactly why large-scale agriculture rarely celebrates it. There is no expensive machine to sell, no complicated system to lock you into, and no patent on a worm. The lesson here is straightforward. Give nature your waste, and it will go to work for you, building healthier soil, healthier plants, and a very practical income stream at the same time. Mealworms, the garage mini factory. Now let's move to number 9, because this is where things start to get even more surprising. Picture an ordinary garage with shelves, old tools, a few forgotten boxes, maybe a bicycle leaning in the corner. Then imagine a row of plastic containers quietly rustling like dry leaves. Inside them are mealworms, the larval stage of the darkling beetle, and they are one of the most efficient little feed factories you can raise in a small space. People hear the word insect and immediately hesitate, but biologically, mealworms are remarkable. In dry weight, they can contain up to 55% protein, and they are packed with essential amino acids. When you compare feed conversion, the difference is hard to ignore. A cow may need around 8 kilograms of feed to produce 1 kilogram of protein, a pig around 4, but mealworms can do it with less than 2. That means cheap bran, grain byproducts, and vegetable scraps can be turned into valuable feed for poultry, reptiles, and fish. But the real hidden value is not only the insect itself, it is the byproduct known as frass. Mealworm frass is a concentrated organic fertilizer rich in chitin, and chitin does something very interesting in the soil. It can trigger a plant's natural defense response, almost as if the plant senses insect pressure and starts preparing itself to resist. In practical terms, that means stronger resilience in the garden from a system that barely takes up any room. So the lesson here is one I have seen proven again and again. Never judge livestock by size alone. Some of the smartest forms of efficiency are happening on the smallest scale, sometimes right there in the corner of a garage. Part 3. Snails, the slow-moving goldmine. And that brings us to number 8, a creature that most gardeners see and immediately want to remove: snails. But this is exactly where a good grower learns to think differently. A snail can take what many people throw away, cabbage leaves, weeds, carrot tops, and other soft garden waste, and convert it into usable protein with almost no noise, very little smell, and minimal water. Snail meat is considered a delicacy in many markets, with around 18% easily digestible protein and very low fat. So even before we go any further, there is already a high-value food angle here for the right buyer. But what really makes snails stand out is the second market most beginners never think about: cosmetics. Snail mucin, the slime snails produce, contains glycoproteins and hyaluronic compounds associated with moisture retention and tissue repair. Researchers noticed long ago that when a snail damages its shell, it relies on its own secretion to protect and repair itself. Today, that same natural substance has become a premium ingredient in skincare products around the world. And unlike many conventional livestock systems, snails are not easy to industrialize on a massive scale without major cost and complexity. That gives the small homesteader a real advantage, especially when working with a moist, controlled enclosure and a niche market. The lesson here is one every serious grower should remember. What the industrial world dismisses as a pest, the observant homesteader may recognize as an opportunity. Part 4. Quail, the fast-track egg machine. Now we come to number 7, where tiny size turns into serious production in a very short amount of time. Quail. If you are the kind of grower who wants to see results quickly, quail are hard to ignore. A quail can hatch and begin laying eggs in as little as 6 weeks. Put that beside a chicken, which often takes around 5 months, and you immediately see why so many small-scale keepers are drawn to them. One quail can produce up to 300 eggs a year, and what really makes that impressive is the space factor. You can keep 200 quail in less room than a standard chicken coop would require, which makes them one of the most efficient egg producers for a backyard or compact homestead. There is a reason birds like these mattered so much in difficult times. In harsher years, including drought periods across parts of Central Asia and the former Soviet region, quail were quietly valued as a practical survival animal. Their eggs are nutrient-dense, easy to digest, and contain nearly twice the vitamin B1 and B2 per gram compared with chicken eggs. And from a business point of view, the numbers stay interesting. While standard chicken eggs may sell for around $5 a dozen, quail eggs can regularly bring in $3 to $5 a dozen, despite their smaller size. And once you move into specialty products like pickled quail eggs, the value can climb much higher in gourmet markets. The lesson here is simple and powerful. Speed and space efficiency can completely change the game. You do not need wide pasture or a big barn to produce a steady flow of nutritious, marketable eggs. Part 5. Muscovy ducks, the independent hissers. From there, we move into number 6, and this is one of my favorite birds for a working garden: Muscovy ducks. In many old villages, people used to call them the hissers because, unlike many other ducks, they make very little noise. That alone makes them appealing if you have nearby neighbors or a smaller property. But what really sets Muscovies apart is how independent they are. These ducks are active foragers, and they do a tremendous job hunting slugs, insects, and other pests that can damage crops and garden beds. Instead of simply consuming feed you bring to them, they become part of the farm system and give something back every day. It gets even better when you look at reproduction. Muscovy ducks are well known for sitting on their own eggs and raising their own ducklings. For a small farm or backyard setup, that means less dependence on incubators, less electricity, and less hands-on labor from you. Their meat is also leaner and firmer than standard duck meat, which gives it a premium appeal in certain restaurant and specialty markets. When you add all of that together, quiet behavior, pest control, natural brooding, and valuable meat, you start to see why they are such a useful animal for the small grower. The lesson here follows an old and very wise principle. Keep the livestock that helps feed itself. Real sustainability is not about doing more work every year. It is about choosing animals that reduce your daily burden while still producing value. Part 6. Rabbits, the quiet meat bank. And now we reach number 5, the halfway point in our countdown, with an animal that has quietly fed families for generations: rabbits. In many post-war villages, rabbits earned a nickname that tells you everything you need to know. They were called the domestic meat bank. And when you run the numbers, it is easy to understand why. A single doe can produce 40 to 60 kits in a year. That can mean well over 200 pounds of meat annually from an animal that lives on a diet built mostly from hay, forage, and vegetable scraps. On a usable meat per acre basis, rabbits can even outperform beef cattle, which is something most people never stop to consider because they are so used to thinking bigger animals must always mean bigger returns. But there is also a modern business angle here that many people overlook. In some places, selling rabbit meat for human consumption can involve a long list of processing rules and local regulations. So experienced small producers often look at alternative markets and position rabbit as premium, raw pet food for dogs and cats, especially for buyers looking for a hypoallergenic protein source. That can help maintain strong pricing while avoiding some of the barriers tied to conventional meat sales. Then there is the manure, which gardeners have long valued as cold gold because it can go straight into the soil without composting first. So with rabbits, you are not just getting meat, you are getting reproduction, manure, garden fertility, and flexible market options, all from one quiet system. The lesson here is one every homesteader should take seriously. The way you market your farm products can change your financial reality just as much as the way you raise them. Pigeons, the hands-off delicacy. Now we arrive at number 4, and this is where a lot of people completely rethink what a profitable, small livestock system can look like. We're talking about pigeons, raised specifically for squab. And for many homesteaders, this is one of the best-kept, high-margin secrets in the entire conversation. Squab is considered a premium culinary meat, and in gourmet markets, a single bird can sell for around $20 to $30. That alone gets attention, but the real advantage is in the biology of the bird itself. Pigeons form strong pairs, both parents sit on the eggs, and both produce what is known as crop milk to feed their young. That means the birds handle the hardest part of the job for you. No heat lamps, no incubators, no hand feeding, and far less intervention than most people expect from a meat bird. A good breeding pair can bring in roughly $300 to $450 of profit in a year. When you begin to scale that to something like 20 pairs in a simple loft or garage setup, you can start to see how birds that are small, quiet, and self-managing can create very respectable income. And that is the lesson here. Work with biology, not against it. Very often, the most profitable animals are not the ones that demand the most attention, but the ones that naturally do the work themselves. Part 8. Honeybees, beyond honey. At number 3, we come to a classic farm animal, but with a hidden angle that many beginners miss completely: honeybees. Most people step into beekeeping because they picture jars of golden honey lined up on a shelf. But anyone with experience knows honey can be messy to extract, labor-intensive to process, and heavily dependent on weather, nectar flow, and timing. So where does the real small-scale opportunity often appear? It appears when you move beyond honey and start selling genetics, especially mated queens and nucleus colonies, or nukes. Professional beekeepers understand this very well. A starter colony can often sell for $150 to $200, and a single mated queen can bring in $30 to $50 on her own. Once you know how to graft queen cells and build out small colony units, you are no longer just harvesting a product. You are producing the living engine that creates the product. In other words, you are selling the factory, not just the honey that comes out of it. That is a very different business model and often a much smarter one for the small producer. The lesson here is simple. Do not just copy what everyone else is selling. Step back, look at the supply chain, and ask yourself whether you can provide the stock, the tools, or the genetics that new keepers are always searching for. Part 9. Nigerian dwarf goats, the pint-sized dairy kings. And now we reach number 2, where small livestock meets modern demand in a very powerful way, the Nigerian dwarf goat. Over the last several years, interest in miniature farm animals has surged, and these little goats sit right at the center of that trend. They are compact enough for properties where full-size livestock may not be allowed, yet they produce milk rich enough to make them stand out far beyond their size. With butterfat levels often ranging from 6 to 10%, their milk is ideal for premium cheese, rich yogurt, and high-end goat milk soap that small producers can market at excellent value. But as profitable as the dairy side can be, the breeding and pet market is where many people see the strongest returns. Demand for these goats has risen sharply, and registrations have climbed as more hobby farmers and backyard homesteaders look for animals that are practical, manageable, and full of personality. A young female can sell for hundreds of dollars to buyers who want the experience of farm life without the land requirements of larger animals. That is what makes this breed so interesting in today's market. It is not only about meat or milk, it is about offering an animal that fits modern lifestyles while still producing something real and valuable. And that brings us to today's lesson. Value density is not just about output by weight. Sometimes it comes from quality, beauty, manageability, and being exactly what a growing market is looking for. Part 10, Miniature Cattle, the pasture pets. And now we come to number 1, the undisputed kings of small-scale, high-margin farming, miniature and micro-miniature cattle. This is where the economics of niche livestock become almost unbelievable. If you raise a standard beef cow on 5 acres, by the time you factor in feed, land, and butcher costs, your profit may only be a few $100s. But when you breed for a much smaller frame, especially in the case of micro-mini cattle standing under 36 inches tall, you step into an entirely different market. These tiny cattle are not being sold like ordinary beef animals. They are highly sought after as pasture pets by people with small acreage who want the beauty, charm, and personality of cattle without the space and feed demands of a full-size herd. And that demand changes everything. A single micro-mini calf can sell for $10,000, and in some cases even climb as high as $30,000. Some breeders have waiting lists that stretch out for years. That means a family on just a few acres can potentially bring in the kind of income once associated only with much larger cattle operations, but without the same environmental pressure or overhead. And that leads to the final lesson of this countdown. In today's agricultural economy, raising animals is only part of the job. The modern farmer also has to think like a marketer. When you find the right niche, you are no longer trapped by the same commodity prices that keep so many traditional producers struggling. Conclusion. So what is the real takeaway from everything we have covered today? For generations, people have been taught that real farming has to be big. Big land, big equipment, big feed bills, and often very big debt. But the truth is, industrial agriculture can also become a chain that ties you to constant spending, outside inputs, and a system you do not fully control. The animals we talked about today tell a very different story. From earthworms quietly turning kitchen scraps into living fertility, to pigeons raising squab with almost no help, to mini cattle opening the door to an entirely new kind of high-value livestock business, they all point to one powerful truth. Resilience is not built on size alone. It is built on small, living systems that support each other, multiply over time, and make better use of limited space, limited resources, and local opportunity. You do not need hundreds of acres to begin. You do not need a giant tractor or a giant loan. Sometimes all it takes is one bin, one pen, one loft, one hive, or one fenced corner of a backyard to start a cycle that begins to work for you instead of against you. And once that cycle grows, it can do more than produce food or income. It can create independence. As the old saying goes, the farm keeps the person, not the person keeping the farm. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these animals surprised you the most? Are you already raising any of them in your garage, your garden, or your backyard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video opened your eyes to a whole new way of thinking about farming, make sure you subscribe to Farmyard Care and share this with someone who dreams of building a homestead of their own. Keep growing, stay resilient, and I'll see you in the next video.